and helps you become better.
I totally forgot to mention, I need to record this because there's some people who couldn't make it. So you might get a message that says, is it okay to record? So if you guys want to continue with us, just hit okay. I'm sorry, Alex, go ahead.
No, that's good. That's what I wanted to say. Oh, and actually, one more thing. Yeah. So my first year of Nano, I actually did publish the novel, but I didn't reach the 50,000 words that year, but it was enough to kickstart me to just keep going. And so I actually finished it, I think it was in like January, because even after Nano finished, I just kept writing it. So if you don't reach the 50,000 words, as long as you keep working on your novel, that's kind of the point.
Good one, right? And let me tell you, we've all, the four of us have been through a lot of nanos, so we got a lot of info to share with you guys. And I love that there are people from all over the world here today. I know I shared this to some of my email lists. I know I saw some people on Facebook sharing it all over. So welcome everyone. Everyone is welcome here. I want to kick us off with the very first thing, which is in the chat, let us know, if you do not have an idea for your story. I want to see if we have any no's out there. And if so, we're going to get into some details on how to come up with ideas for your story. So, or I guess say yes if you, okay, I'm all over the place. Got it. No idea. Yeah. Not a clue. Yes, I am recording this, and when it's done, I'll send it out to everyone who registered. And I also will share it to the Albuquerque group. So if you didn't register or you're not in Albuquerque, then you might want to just email me or something, or let me know in the chat that you didn't register so I can make sure you get the link. Okay, so there are definitely some no's. Yes, I do. And I started last year in Nano. Awesome. Sci-fi. Yay, sci-fi. All right, so let's talk about ideas. Now, Toy of the Gods. I have no idea where that idea came from, to be honest. Oh, no, I do. That's right. I have to keep thinking about that. So I chased an idea down. I was watching a documentary about the Amazon and how large ships cannot go down the Amazon because of all the sandbars and the different water levels. So it binged an idea in my head. Well, what would it look like if there was a ship that could travel down the Amazon with a group of tourists, and what would happen? And I don't really know where the Inca god came from, right? It's basically a story where a group of tourists are stranded in the Amazon by an Inca god, and they have to make their way back on foot. And so one idea I want to give you is chase an idea that you come up with. Watch a documentary or watch a movie. And when you go, chase that idea. I'm going to give you two more, and I'm going to hand it over to my friends here. Excuse me. Another option is to play Scrabble or Words with Friends. I used to do this with my family all the time. We would play Scrabble, and then I would write down all the words on the board and write a story that included all those words. And it was interesting. It always, excuse me, would lead me somewhere. Sorry, it's my awful allergies. Thank you.
Same.
So Words with Friends or Scrabble would sometimes send me in a direction. Let me turn off my background so you can see the picture. Another thing is art. So this was a picture that one of my friends did for Inktober, and I love it. And it inspired a story. I ended up writing a short story for this one. And on the picture, it's a woman in a dress, right, barefoot. She's got a sword. And it says, just before midnight, she traded her glass stiletto for a blade. And so I ended up buying this from her, buying the copyrights, buying the image, and writing a short story about a Cinderella who traded her glass stilettos for a blade. So art can definitely inspire story ideas. And now I'm going to let Kim, how about you? We'll do this in the same order or whatever order, it doesn't matter.
Story ideas for me. Oh, I can't remember where the quote came from, but somebody said, you know, the first 3 novels you write are autobiographical. And so a lot of my writing is inspired by memories or events that happened when I was younger. And I tend to be drawn towards writing young adult. And so, which sort of matches the whole, you know, mindset of trying to figure out what was my life like at the time, and then now as an adult, how do I make sense of that, and how can I translate that into a story? So that tends to be where my inspiration comes from. It's just from my own events, things that impacted me, that I wish I could have done differently, or that I wish would have gone differently, and imagining how that would have happened. And then as the writer, the really interesting thing is that you shape it how you want it. And in a sense, I think that brings healing to those situations that, you know, even if they weren't necessarily super traumatic, but you're lingering on them for a reason. At least for me, I find that, you know, they stick out for a reason. And so as a writer, I can give them some direction and bring some closure to a certain situation or a certain event that happened. Tamsin.
Are we on to me? For me, a lot of my first books, I actually was just a story I had ahead. It was just a fantasy. I don't know if it's very autobiographical or not. I don't think so necessarily. Maybe it was, in the sense that at the time I was in college and I was meeting all these great new people, and the book is an ensemble piece, and it has to do a lot with accepting the family you're given instead of your blood family, your heart family. The newest stuff, though, that I wrote, if we're talking about where you can get some ideas from. So Billy the Kid, the Curse of Billy the Kid, and the entire Untold Legend series came to me by doing history research. I always used to put history in my stuff, little pieces, and always loved that. Why it never occurred to me that I might want to write historical fantasy, I don't know. And so I did, I ended up wanting to write something for an anthology. And so I was like, I don't know anything about the West. I'm sure I can just research that. And I found stuff on Billy the Kid. And because I was like, what do I know from the West? Oh, Billy, I know who Billy was. No, I didn't. I thought I knew who Billy was. But I ended up down the rabbit hole and discovered this whole murder plot and this whole monopoly of control in the West, and was like, how the hell have we never heard about this war? It's so freaking amazingly interesting, well, at least to me. And it sparked an idea. And I was like, okay, these guys are Irish. What's some Irish folklore that I could grab a big bad from? And then I started doing more and digging through Google. So if there's a part of history that fascinates you, pour yourself a drink of choice, sit down with Google, and start looking at the history of that time period and any stories that happened, or any folklore, or maybe things they heard happen. That's also fun to play with. So if it's always my recommendation is, if you can, there's nothing weirder than actual reality sometimes, and you can build off of that. I often tell people that the Billy the Kid series, I said, have you seen the movie with Emilio Estevez and them about Billy the Kid? And like, it's like that, but if they got the history right and threw in some werewolves and magic for fun, because that's what you do. You make it fun, and you take it and you do something you love with it. I love fantasy, so I blended the two. So that's, and I still look to that. I just sold the next 3 books in the series, the concept, to my publisher, based on what, thank you, Sonia. They just want me to write it up for contract. So, and it's based on more history, all these books behind me. So I'm a big fan of looking to history to create fantasy. Crickets.
Alex, you're up next.
All right. So when coming up with story ideas, a lot of times you have to think about what are the elements of story. And so you have things like plot, setting, character, mood, theme. And so whenever you're coming up with a story, a lot of times you'll start out with one of those things and then just build upon that. So like, say you're coming up with a story based off plot. A lot of like movies do this thing. And so one of the things you can do for coming up with a plot-based story is just to ask a question, what if? So like you could say, what if an asteroid was coming to the Earth? What would happen then? And so that would be like a plot-based story. So you could come up with it based off that. And then like character-based stories, you could just come up with some interesting character. Like it could be like somebody who's just like a mesh of people you know, or it could be someone who you're like, you know what, I'd like to meet someone who has like these qualities. And you could base it off of that. Or you could even base it off a group of characters, be like, you know what, I want to create like a really strong family dynamic. Like you could say, okay, what about if my main characters were like a whole bunch of siblings and the way they interact with each other? Game of Thrones is a little bit like that. A lot of it is character based, right? And so like setting based, one of the things about setting that you have to realize is it's not just place. Setting can also include non-tangible things like governments, cultures, and it can be technologies. So for me, a lot of the stories I write are settings based because I work in technology. And so I'll come up with like interesting technologies and be like, hey, what could be the implications of this technology, and just build off of there, right? And so settings-based stories, a lot of times those are going to end up being like sci-fi or fantasy. Like speculative fiction works really well with settings-based stories. And then mood is a little bit harder because it's more abstract than the other ones. So you could be like, you know what, I want to come up with a story that really makes me feel like such and such. A lot of times it could be based off of a feeling that you had on a certain day. You could just like come up with that story instantly. So that one's a little bit harder. And then for theme, if you're coming up with a theme-based story, you want to be careful about that because it could end up being like really preachy. And so a technique you can use to make it less like that, to reduce that risk, is to base it off of something that's happened to you personally. And I'm not just talking about something that you believe. It has to be something that you've had personal experience with. That way you get that personal touch, and so it feels more genuine. And so for me, like an example of how I came up with my first story for Nano, it was called The Entrusters. And so I started out with setting. I wanted to do a story where cell phones played a really big role. And so I was doing a whole lot of thinking, and I was like, okay, how could I make cell phones? How could I make a story out of that? And so I was stumped for a while. I was thinking about it like all through October, but then like I had a tech support call that I was on, and the woman who was helping me, I don't know, I was just kind of like inspired by her. And I was like, you know what? I want to write a story where the heroine is like a really like smart, analytical heroine who works in tech support. And so I kind of built off of that. And I'm like, okay, I can combine cell phones with tech support. And then after that, I was kind of trying to think about like, okay, how can I make this like really smart? And so I started to build off rules and like, okay, I'm going to make this story about a game of sorts that the heroine has to play with other like really scary characters, like a mafia boss and really manipulative people. And so I was like, okay, what's something about cell phones? And I'm like, cell phones are about communication. What's something really scary about communication? secrets and revealing people's secrets. And so I was like, okay, so I built the story based off secrets. And so I was like, okay, it's going to be a game where people can trade secrets of other people. And I just kind of built it off of that. So whenever you'll start with like one element, plot, setting, et cetera, and you'll start adding other elements and just build on that. And so that's kind of the technique I use.
Awesome. Thank you, Alex. All right, thank you, everybody. All right, so let's talk a little bit about too many ideas. I know some of you out there have too many ideas, and I understand what that's like because I have a sci-fi that I want to write. I have the idea in my head, I know the stories, but for me right now, it's readership. I already have a fan base for my adventure thrillers, and they would not be very happy with me if I stopped, right? Because I have 2 more books in this series to finish. And so I don't want to piss them off. So I'm setting the sci-fi aside. But if you don't have readership, some other things to consider are, what are people, well, first of all, if you're publishing, not everyone here is probably interested in publishing. Some of you just want to write for the first time, a novel for the first time. But if you're going to publish, think about what are people reading a lot right now. Or another option is to, and I've done this before, write down your different ideas atop a cross of page, and then try to outline each of the ideas that you have. If you have something that you can make a huge outline for, that's the one you want to use for Nano. If you have all these other ideas, but you can't add to them, then I would say shelve those for now. That has helped me to decide sometimes what I'm going to work on. And I don't know if you guys have ideas about if too many ideas.
Oh yeah, I have lots of stuff I want to write. In fact, I have fans of my original series that would love the next book, and I'm working on it slowly, but I'm contracted. And so that changes things a little bit. I can't make that decision on just based on readership. I have to finish contracts. And so that changes things. But I have a lot of ideas and things I would love to do. I agree with what she said. If you've got a couple different things you want to work on, and I'm going to actually do this as well. I'm going to take your advice, Sonia, and I've got a couple things that I could be working on during Nano. I'm just going to jot down ideas on where I might see them going, and which one I think is going to be the smoothest road for me, because that's what you want. You want it to be the smoothest road. I will say this though. If you were working on something and it's smooth going and you hit a wall and you just think, I'm not going to be able to go forward, maybe another character is talking to you in your head. There's no rule in Nano that says you have to work on the exact same thing the entire time. So if you hit a wall and you're hearing something else, set it aside, keep writing, go on to something else and work on it. Obviously, how much cooler it'd be to get a lot 50K done on one thing, but if you don't and you get 25K done on 2 things, there's no judgment.
I wanted to add to that, Tamsin. Yeah, there's no rule that says you have to work on one project during Nano. The only requirement, because it's not even, official, is that you reach 50,000 words, and it's really just to help you as a writer get your stuff out on paper. That's really all it's about, is get those words out on paper, out of your head, onto the page, and then you can work with it. Something that I do sometimes when I get stuck is I just start writing backstory, stuff that I don't intend to be part of the main story, but I'm just exploring. I'm going to put my character in this certain situation and what would they do? And that's sometimes helpful because you learn things about your character. They're like, oh, I hadn't really considered that, but I guess that is how they would act in this situation. And that can inform what happens with this character in the rest of the story. So that's just some ideas in terms of, if you feel stuck, you don't have to work on the same idea. You can always work on something, a completely different idea, or you can just work character exploration, basically.
And one thing I want to add about having too many story ideas is it's easier to write something you're passionate about. So if you like go through your story ideas and say, okay, which of these ideas mean the most to me? Which is impacting me the most? What do I feel really passionate about? And a lot of times it'll be something that can be specific to what you're going through in life. Because as we're going through in life, we're always kind of reevaluating ourselves and learning about life. We're just trying to decide, okay, who are we? And so sometimes there's certain messages or certain events that speak to us stronger than others. And a lot of times whenever we're writing, we incorporate that into our stories. And so that can kind of guide you a little bit.
Awesome. And yeah, and just so you guys know, in the past, I've tried to write I went in planning on writing 2 different stories during Nano, and it just didn't work jumping from one universe to the other. But this year, I'm going to try to write both books 4 and 5 of my series, because oftentimes while I'm writing, I come up with ideas for the next book in my head. So I feel like it's probably a good match to write both books at the same time. Now let's talk a little bit about character. Now, first of all, I do want to say, I think there's probably a few people here who are going to write nonfiction. And if you are, okay, thank you. First of all, Carol, thank you for letting me know. So I've heard of Save the Cat, but I've never read it. But Carol says it helps to outline your story. So if anyone's looking for help in outlining. And Sunny B wants to know if anyone's published with the Big 5. And I think it's Big 4 now. I think we lost one. Tamsin, it's Big 3 now. Tamsin, you're published with one of the Big 3, right?
No, I'm not. I'm with an affiliation. They're friends, but they're not actually.
Okay. And if there's anyone here published with one of the Big 3, feel free to share that. Yeah, Big 3. Who are the Big 3?
Penguin. But then did the Penguin just get bought by Random House?
I don't remember.
Yeah, we'd have to look it up.
Right?
Penguin, Random House, HarperCollins, Simon & Schuster, I think. And Macmillan is part of, and Tor. Tor is still around. But Tor could be, I don't know, Simon & Schuster, I'd have to look it up.
So the top tier is Pearson, McGraw-Hill, and HMH. Those are considered the Big 3. It's because they're all buying each other, eventually it'll be one giant conglomerate, right?
Yep.
So those are the Big 3. But let's get back to character. All right, writing character. So I can tell you when I first wrote Toy the Gods, my main character was Leslie Kicklighter. And I learned a lot by writing the first book, which was when my reviewers read it, they said, your character doesn't seem very, I don't know, she's not very, like she does things that seem opposite of each other, right? So it was then that I learned from then on, I write a backstory or I write an outline about my character. And I usually do this right before Nano. I'll come up with as many characters as I think I'm going to have in my story. So for example, AJ Blue Horse, which is one of my main characters, I'll write an outline that includes who her parents are, where she went to school, what she did as a kid growing up, right? Because when we throw in, think of it this way, if you throw in a ballerina who grew up in California or a plumber who lives in New York City into a room with a giant octopus alien that's trying to kill them, they're both going to act differently, right? So by knowing the backstory of your character, you can throw them in any situation and you're going to know how they're going to react. So get to know your character, or even sit down and interview your character. You're going to sit down and like I'm going to pretend Leslie Kicklighter is sitting across from me and I'm going to ask her some questions. Like, what do you love? What's your favorite color? What's your favorite food? So think about getting into your character's mind a little bit. All right, so whoever wants to go next.
Dead air. Okay. Alex, did you have anything?
Yeah. So on character, so you have to realize that in a story, or most stories at least, there are more than just one character. There are a lot of different characters, right? And so your protagonist needs to be your deepest character. They need to have the most conflict because they're the driver of the story. And so your side characters, you don't want them to be as complex as your main character because then they could overshadow your main character. And so one of the ways that you develop complexity is you think about a character's wants and a character's needs. And usually these two things are in conflict. So what they want isn't always what they need. And that drives a lot of conflict in the story because throughout the story, they're trying to chase what they want. And so they're going about it in the wrong way, but eventually they figure out what they need. And that's how they overcome the obstacles that they're facing throughout the whole story. And so the more conflicts within a character, that creates depth. So for your side characters, you don't want like a whole bunch of conflicts within them. You don't want a whole bunch of inner conflict. And your main character, you want to have the most. And so your main character, you might have like 3 major inner conflicts. Your ally characters and your villains, you might have like 2 main inner conflicts, and then side characters, you might have just like 1 inner conflict or none at all. Usually like a lot of like minor characters don't have any conflict because you're not really seeing things from their perspective.
You can also write, if there are people that write ensemble stuff where you do get the point of view of more than just one protagonist. So if you are doing that, obviously you still have one main person usually, but if you are writing something from multiple points of view, you can give those characters a little more. I write different things. I write first person, third person, multiple perspective. It just depends on what your story calls for. So that's what I was going to mention. Think about who you want to represent. What kind of story do you want to tell? And when you think about that story, who should tell it? I was writing Moon Over Manhattan, which is the first Nano book I ever did. And I was writing it, but it just felt empty. And I couldn't figure out why. I felt like I was missing half of the story. And then all of a sudden I realized that I was only writing from Denica's point of view and not from Cash's as well. And so I ended up writing it from 2 points of view. And they both have very, very complicated stories. And then they weave together. And then all of a sudden I had a book because I wasn't getting everything that was creating the world. Because to me, the world build is my primary thing. And I'm sure we're going to get to that. But as far as characters go, I just like to pick flawed people. I think flaws are interesting. There's a line from the musical Rent that always makes me smile. And she sings, I'm looking for baggage that goes with mine. And flaws are what make characters interesting.
Can you dive a little more? So there is questions about flaws in the chat. So you can
great.
dive into more of that, Tamsin.
Yeah, what was the question exactly? Can you read it?
Hold on. There were a couple.
Okay,
I know my characters, but I'm having difficulty with an arc. I'm trying to give him a flaw to fix.
So one of the things that's hard is you want to write this really great, perfectly awesome character, and giving them flaws is hard. Some of the flaws, Billy's got a temper, and that actually is from history. So he has to deal with that. Some of the flaws you can create with what problem you've created for them, and how they react to it. But flaws can be anything. They can be, temper. They can be that the fact that they are not maybe good with people, or maybe they tend to put their foot in the mouth, or it can be anything. It doesn't have to be physical. It doesn't have to be emotional. It can be whatever you think makes them more relatable. Richard Brewer in mine becomes a werewolf. Spoiler. But he doesn't. I treat it like his problem is that he doesn't want anyone to know, and he wants to keep it in the closet. And he wants to change everything about how he reacts with people so they don't know the truth. And so this causes a lot of problems for him. And so it's not so much a flaw as it is a choice, right? And it creates conflict for him. So it may not be so much a flaw as you might think of the technical definition, as much as it is making choices based on how they feel as people. And I know that might sound a little strange because they're not real, sort of. And so it has to do with choice, and it has to do with how those choices can affect where it puts them in, because that's a flaw too. If you're just like, I'm racing in, I have no control over my impulses, I'm going to go in and fight this battle, and I'm not prepared, that's a flaw, and then that adds to what can happen in your story. Does that kind of help answer the question? Or am I like,
I don't know. I don't see anything in the chat yet. But well, and I just want to say, and your flaw can be, well, and someone mentioned in the chat that a virtue can sometimes be a flaw, right? Like when someone interviews us for a job, and they're like, so what are you bad at? You'd be like, well, I'm really picky. That's where we're looking at something that's a flaw, but also a virtue sometimes. And Carol said, yes, I like the choice idea since my guy is a nice guy.
And he can be a nice guy. I had someone once complain to me, but you make your character so likable. And I'm like, you do realize you're saying that about my villain, and she is a shitty human being. But it's like that Loki situation. She doesn't see herself as the villain. And she's funny and she's interesting. And so thus, yeah. So yeah, it can be exactly like that.
Can you guys see my Scrivener screen?
No? I can see a black space with a white line.
Okay, hold on. Someone was just asking, how do I, writing a nonfiction, I'm having trouble remembering sequences and people's names. I'm going to try a screen share again.
A Bible.
Yeah.
Make a book Bible as you go, or when you do your edit. A book Bible is exceedingly helpful. Keeps track of your magic, names of people, what they look like. My editor does a lot of it for me because she knows I suck at it. But I'm actually doing it for the new book that I'm working on so that I don't fall into that again.
So, and if you guys don't have Scrivener, can you guys see my Scrivener screen now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So on the left-hand side, I love Scrivener because I will put together all my characters, so I have some characters that I forget how to spell their name. And then each of these sections has information about those characters. Pardon me. And then up here are all my chapters. So all my chapters are named. They're in the order that they're going to be, unless I decide I'm going to move them, which it's pretty easy to move them. But if you don't have Scrivener, you could create file folders, with the name of your characters. And I would say an outline, maybe a handwritten outline even, or I've used Excel to create an outline of each sequence that's going to happen. But that's how I manage my characters. I heard somebody go start to say something. Did anybody have a question on that?
Can I?
Yes, please.
There's something I want to come back to about the character arc. I can't remember. I need to scroll through the.
Okay.
But what I wanted to say, and I don't know if this is going to help you specifically, but remember when Alex talked about what does the character want and what does the character need, and that creates a conflict, and you want to think about the ending of your story if you're writing fiction, and what do they get in the end, right? Because that's what's gonna determine what I'm trying to say is that sometimes the flaw isn't the thing that gets fixed, sometimes it is. And between the character want and the character need, the external and the internal, you're going to have a resolution on both. Either they get both what they want, they get the external but not the internal, they fix the internal flaw but they don't get the external. And so think a little bit about that, because you don't necessarily need to fix the flaw if you're having trouble with that. It could be just the resolution of the external thing. Just something for you to think about in terms of character arc and what needs to be fixed and what needs to be resolved in the end. Hopefully that's helpful.
Cool. And I don't know if I've answered everyone's questions so far. So if you have a question about character, feel free to unmute yourself and ask us.
Hi, I have a question.
Go for it.
I'm writing a character that lets me put out a theme, something I feel strongly about. And I'm kind of exploring I guess maybe for lack of a better word, the moral implications of it. But I'm scared that the character is more of a theme than an actual fleshed out person. Like I'm making the character go through stuff and so that I can say something and in my own self, like figure out what this means. So I don't know if that makes sense or.
No, it makes sense. I felt that way about when I first wrote my main character, Leslie Kicklighter. She really she just reacted to everything around her. She didn't really have her own personality. And I would say in this case, maybe write a backstory, a short story about that character, and maybe even make that part of Nano so it's part of your word count. But get to know that character, maybe use your own personality on that character to kind of start fleshing her out a little bit. But give her opinions, right? Because we all have opinions. And sometimes that gets lost when we have a character just reacting to what's happening in the story. My panel of experts, what do you guys have to say?
Yeah, so one thing I wanted to say about this is that whenever you're writing characters, you want them to basically feel like real people. And so one of the things that makes us people in real life is our life experiences. So you can try thinking about what life experiences specifically happened to you that inspired you to explore this theme. And so you want to kind of focus on experiences that seem real, stuff that happened outside in the physical world, and how they emotionally impacted the character, how the character responded, how the character basically interacted with the situation at hand. And so the more of those real world concrete experiences you can incorporate, the more real and concrete your character will seem. And so they'll become less abstract, because theme is a really abstract thing, but character is more concrete.
My question about the nonfiction, doing the nonfiction book for Nano. I'm basically writing it for myself rather than to publish anything. It's about what's gone on in my life. And there's a lot of people's names that I don't remember. And there's a lot of events that I'm not sure what order they happened in, was what I was getting at. So I was wondering how to deal with that.
So my suggestion would be to, well, first of all, write your list of characters. And if you can't remember their names, maybe come up with names, you know, that aren't their real names anyway, and use those names in place of the names you can't remember. But also, we don't have to write things in any particular order, right? I tend to write all the ideas in my head down first, and then I connect them all. So you don't have to begin at the beginning. I would say write the scenes or write the experiences as you remember them, but don't worry about putting them in any particular order until you're ready to kind of finish it. And then you can move chapters around. You know, if you're using Word, you can copy and paste them, move them around. In Scrivener, you can just move chapters. But I'd say just work in the order, like what is topmost of mind first.
Okay. All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else have an answer to that?
I wanted
No,
to
but I have a question.
Okay, we're gonna let's let Kim answer the Sharon's question, and then we'll let you ask your question, okay?
I just quickly wanted to ask Sharon, and you don't have to answer this, but I'd say, you know, what is the purpose of the writing? And this gets really, you know, meta, but I know for myself, and especially when you're talking about nonfiction, like, are you writing an academic paper or?
No, it's for self-healing. I had an event happen in January, and a lot of my past got brought up with all of that, and so it's just for healing myself and work with a therapist.
And that's a lot of the reasons why I write, but I write fiction. Because there was this really interesting piece I read, and I just don't remember the author, but they basically talked about how when something's so personal and it's so painful, you tend to speak in second person. So, or in generalized terms, like nobody says, well, I can't even think of a good example, but basically when we're trying to sort of distance ourselves from the situation in order to do the healing, and that's why we use second person, like, well, you would do this or you would do that, as opposed to saying, well, I would do this, right? I don't know where I'm going with this whole the writing for healing is definitely in my wheelhouse. and
So how do you write your, you know, if you're writing a fiction story, but based on real life, do you write your scenes from beginning to end? Or are you kind of jumping in the middle? What do they look like?
There's mostly just, you know, points of like, this was a really important thing that happened, and this was a really important thing that happened. But I think what I'm trying to get at, in terms of the writing for healing in general, is that for me, what I found when I wrote it as a fiction piece is that at some point it's easier to let go and start letting those characters have their own experiences. I don't know if that makes any sense to you.
A little bit.
because they take on a life of their own, and I started distancing myself from the character and from the events, and that helped it make sense to me.
Okay. All right. Well, I have one more thing to say, and then we'll have Carol ask her question, which is whether you're writing nonfiction or fiction, if you have any research to do, try to do it before November, because if you're, especially, right, as you're trying to get at least 1,600 words done a day, you don't have the time to stop and do research. So if you're writing, though, you've done your research, but you come across something you don't know yet, just put like, I put like 3 asterisks or something. And I'll type in, I need to research this, and I'll keep writing. So don't feel like you have to go and research that day. You can just type it in your story or come up with something that you think is right. And then at the end, you know, note, I'll research this later. So that way it doesn't slow down your writing process. And Carol, what was your question?
Well, as far as character goes, I have him pretty well defined in my head. And, but I'm not sure how quickly I describe him. I've already written about 1,500 words. I have no idea if I can start that with the nano. I don't know the rules. It's my first nano experience. But anyway, what I'm having difficulty with is I've developed his personality pretty good. But how quickly, how do I put that he's got brown hair, green eyes, he's got a paunch, he's 45. I don't know how to exactly, how do you weave that in, or do you just describe that in a sentence?
So it all depends. Most of my characters, I don't really describe them, except when I tend to have more than one point of view in my stories. So a secondary character will see my main character and be like, oh, she's kind of short for, you know, who I thought she was a little taller, and she's short in real person. Or, you know, she's got a long braid, so she talks about braiding it. Or, you know, there's the ones that writers use where they're looking at themselves in a mirror, or they're glancing in a window in a shop and they see themselves. So there's a bunch of different ways you can try to describe them. I necessarily don't try to describe my characters that much, just so that the reader can kind of put themselves in their place.
Sonia dies on us. Oh, girl. Let her do that. I'll continue her. I'll continue her
okay.
thought. One of the things I'll sometimes do is I'll talk about the choice of clothing. So one of my short characters prefers heels because she likes to be taller, and she'll talk about how much she hates being 5'2", and so she wears 3-inch heels because she wants to be 5'5". Or someone who does have, like you said, 45 and has a little bit of a paunch. He might talk about, oh, this shirt clings to my tummy too much, and I'm going to put on this, or I look good. And you wouldn't always put it in the same section. So you might mention their age somehow one place and their hair another, and you might spread it out over different things that actually, that it affects. So for instance, I'm not going to talk about what Billy's wearing unless it matters, right? I'm not going to be like, and he stepped in with his jeans and his white shirt, but he's getting dressed to go to talk to someone, like an interview. And so what happens is he's like, okay, he dressed up nice for this. And so we mention it. So if it's part of the story and you drop that information, it's never going to feel like an info dump, if that helps make sense in some way. Being 45, there are things that go along with that. My knees have not been the same since I was 30. Being 45, maybe, or you know what I mean? And say he jumps down from something, his knees give, and he bitches about it. And now you can drop his age, because now you can connect it to something. And not only have you connected it for yourself, for it to make sense in the story, but now someone's going to remember that better because it connects for them as well.
Yeah, well, I cheated with one of my characters. She comes out, she's a minor character, but not a total minor. She's she's necessary. But I had the neighbor say, wow, something about Mrs. Butterworth. And because she looks like the syrup bottle. So I thought that was funny.
I think that's perfect. I love it. I love it. It's a definite visual. You don't even have to give us anything else after that, right? So right. I think that's really great. That's the right idea. Yeah.
I wanted to add to that, that how your characters see each other tells a lot about them too. Let me see if I can explain that properly. So if I'm making an observation about Tanzan, then you get an idea of Tamsin, right? But you also get an idea of the observer and how I perceive the world, right? The things that I choose to notice and call out about a certain person says a lot about me and what I think is important. So that's also something to keep in mind, where you can give information about a person by saying what they notice about something else.
Yeah, I like that. Good point. Yeah. And Sony has returned. You are on mute.
Yep, I'm muted, so you guys wouldn't hear me having that coughing fit. And actually, just so you guys know, I actually have to leave for a job. I'm working 2 jobs to pay off my editor and my cover artists, so that hopefully I can eventually start making full-time money from my books. But so I'm gonna leave Kim and you in the hands of Kim and Tamsin and Alex here shortly. But do we have any more questions about character?
I have a question. I'm going to try to articulate this question as best I can. So I know for sure one character that is probably going to be the main character, but I have at least one other character who's going to be very heavily involved and might be a main character too, but just like from a, like telling both of their points of view. And something that's really just tripping me up even before getting started is which point of view to tell their stories from. So the main character, I can really envision telling her story from a first person point of view, but this other character, when I think of explaining her story, I think of telling it in second person. It's just kind of jumbling my mind and like how to tell this story in the first place. So do you guys have any advice on, you know, how you determine that and how you can work in like multiple points of view into one story?
So I can talk about, well, so I attempted writing Toy of the Gods in first person, and I just didn't like how it felt difficult. So I changed it to third person, and suddenly that was easier. So what you might do is just, and you know, talking about rules of NaNoWriMo, you can, you know, there are no real rules, right? You're writing 50,000 words. If you want to try writing it in first person and figure out, okay, that doesn't work, let me try it in third person. In my case, I have several points of view in my stories. I have my 2 main characters, 2 main female characters, and then I have a villain usually. Well, I usually have 2 villains. Yeah, and so basically they have their own chapters, right? So a whole chapter is just their point of view. So I'd say, you know, experiment with that and see, just try it and see what is easier or sounds better to you. And then my other panelists might have other suggestions.
Yeah, I've got some suggestions. So whenever you're writing a character, a lot of times in a story, there's going to be like a scene or a few scenes that are more impactful and more meaningful to the character than the other scenes. They're going to be very like climactic scenes. And so what you might try doing is for each of your characters that you're trying to determine their point of view, write that scene and write it in a few different points of view. So you'll write it in first person, you can write it in second person, third person, and then do that for all of your characters, and then go back and read them and try to determine, okay, which point of view that I wrote this part in, which has the most emotional impact. And you can even get somebody else's perspective on this. You could have someone read it, like a friend or family member, be like, hey, will you read these and let me know which you found most impactful? And that can help you determine which point of view to use. Because you have to keep in mind that when you're writing fiction, you're writing for a reader. And so you want to kind of consider the reader's point of view, consider, okay, what's going to have the most meaning for my reader? What are they going to enjoy the most?
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay, we had a question. Oh, did anybody else, did Tamsin or Kim, do you guys have anything you wanted to add to that?
I mean, I'll support what you were saying. I started writing one thing in third person, and it was utter shite, and I had to switch. I've only done a couple books in first person, and so when I all of a sudden discovered I was going to have to, because it just flowed better to write Billy in first person from his point of view and just him. It obviously, one of the things that makes that hard is it limits you, right? You have to, but it also made me get creative. You know, the next one I'm working on will probably be third person dual perspective. And you know what? You just need to start writing it. And I'm going to tell you, if you start writing it, you don't even start till day one of Nano, and partway through you switch, and you think this is better, don't go back and fix the rest of it. Just keep going, put a big mark, like highlight that whole section in red font or whatever you need to do so that you know you need to go back and fix it. But I think that's the truth of it. You have all these options. One of them is going to flow better, and there's no wrong answer. It just depends on what works better for you regarding point of view.
Cool. Thank you, Tamsin. Kim, did you want to say anything?
I don't know if this was said because I had to take a little bio break. Sorry.
That's okay.
One of my stories from Nano came from an exercise where I wrote a scene in first person, and then I wrote the exact same scene in third person. And it was a revelation to me when I wrote it in third person. I was like, whoa, wait a minute. This I can work with. So you could certainly do that and just try writing one scene and just see how it feels different and how you could play with it. And like Tamsin said, you know, if you find that one works better than the other, you don't have to go back and fix it until later. Nano is really just about getting your words out and getting your ideas out and getting, you know, taking that block of clay and putting it down on your workbench and massaging it. That's it. And then later you get to shape it into what you want it to be.
Cool. Thank you, Kim.
Thank you.
All right. So let's talk real quick a little bit more about story arc. So someone was asking a little more info about story arc. So when you're building a story arc, I'll use my latest book as an example. And Fiduci, I got your email address. I copied it, so you will, and anyone who signed up for the Eventbrite link or through Eventbrite will get this recording. So in the book, my character she's a Navajo character, and she's inherited the powers from an Inca god. And so her arc, she doesn't always have a flaw, right? So in this case, her flaw is that the powers that she inherited are making her think very godlike, right? So we see her begin to think like a god, and she's like, whoa, that's weird. That's not me. And so at some point, we have to test her flaw. We have to throw her in the worst possible situation. So in this case, towards the end of the book, well, we start to see her more and more have more and more problems with this issue, right? She's thinking more like a god. When she's in the middle of the Amazon, the god powers are stronger. And then she's in an earthquake surrounded by people who are pissing her off, and she almost kills them all by setting them all on fire. So we have to see this growth of the character. And then so finally she's like, oh shit, I need to control this. And she finds a way to control herself. And then towards the end, she's controlling those powers, and they aren't controlling her anymore, right? So that's an example of an arc. You want to see that progression. The worst possible thing happens, but then they learn from that worst possible thing. That's my input on arc.
I'll briefly say something about arc. There's so much stuff out there, you know, in terms of like the hero's journey, and you have to go up and then down. And to me, the most basic idea of arc, when I think arc, I think change. What's changing? What's changing from the beginning to the end, and what needs to happen in order to make that change? And if you can just start with that, I think, and just keep thinking about it in the very basic term, what's changing in one scene from the next, what's changing and what needs to happen. That also makes sure that your story keeps moving, because something's happening, something's changing, right? It doesn't have to be an external thing and an internal thing every time. It can be an internal change in one scene, an external change in the next scene, but just keep thinking in terms of change. And that'll really help you kind of get a handle on what's going on in general in the story, because things are changing towards the end result that you want.
Okay, just to let you guys know, I'm heading out. So you guys, Kim, you are now officially the host, and they're still gonna talk about plots, world building, and then how to keep writing in November. As MLs, we have a lot of experience with that. Thank you guys. Thank you, Michelle. It's good to see you. Thank you all. Yes, I'm hopefully I will feel better soon.
Feel
Thank
better,
you all.
hon.
Thank you. All right. See you
Feel better,
all in
Sonia.
November.
Bye, Sonia.
I'll add on to what they were saying about ARC and about moving things along. First thing I want to say is that in November, it does not matter if you write a scene and it doesn't move things. When you go to publish or when you want to clean it up, it does. And so while you're writing and you're thinking about scenes, think about what is actually moving the story along in that actual scene. It doesn't have to be monumental. It can be characterization. It can be someone learning something. But usually in chapters, we're trying to, and as scenes go along, and I think like this because I did theater, so I think of scene and one act and second act, and so you want to make sure that we're moving and learning and moving towards what do we need to know for this to finalize? What are the pieces of this puzzle that we all need, that the reader needs to know, that you already do, that's going to get us to the end, especially if you're doing a mystery or something like that. The other thing I always think of is something that I used to teach when I was teaching high school theater. We used to talk about, how do I not make something boring? Two people are sitting and talking. And what do we do? And a lot of times people have a tendency to write scenes where people sit down and they just sit in a chair and they talk. You'll get more words if you don't just write dialogue, if you also write things they do. People watch. What do people do when they sit down and talk? They get up, they move, they drink, they order food. Think about all the little things. I like to talk about props. Think about props, things that to pull into it, things where you're at, the location you are, what things look like. And it's going to fill that out and make it more real for your reading audience as well. But it'll help you feel that scene out more as well. You can have a great conversation with information we need while they do something else, while they're traveling. So now you've taken care of part of that and you've covered something else.
Yeah, I'm going to add some stuff about character arc. So one of the things that speaks to us most as humans is growth. So if you can show growth in a character arc, that's going to be really impactful for your readers. And so one of the ways that we show growth in novels is transitioning from that want to that need. And so when your character, they'll start out pursuing the want, but then there's going to be a transition stage. A lot of time it'll be kicked off by an external event. Basically the external conflict, it'll help your character realize their need. And so then they'll be like, oh, okay, I know that what I want has been different from what I need. So now I need to start pursuing what I need. And so that will help them overcome their character flaw. It'll show a lot of growth. And then I also wanted to add on about one of the things Tamsin was saying about the scenes where there's a lot of dialogue and props. So one of the strengths about written stories is that you can dip into the character's head and you can really explore their emotions through more than just the physical things that you see or hear the way you would in like a visual media like movies. And so one of the things you can do in novels that you can't do in other forms is to basically talk about the character's perspective. So whenever they're having that conversation, you can write down narration about how the character is actually feeling about the other character's words, how it's impacting them emotionally.
I have a question about character arc. Hey everybody. So my question is just to the whole group, but Kim, you were talking about something that had me kind of marinating on it. So my character is an emotional idea, I think. Like they're going through emotional experiences, which is what I really want to talk about. I'm having an issue with external plot that fits that. And then as far as climatic points, they're making a lot of internal changes so that at the end, I feel like it's going to be more quiet than it is going to be something big. And I don't think that that would be very successful. I'm not sure how to do that, if I'm making sense.
Okay, let me see if I understood what you were saying. So
I can give an example.
Go ahead.
Okay, so my theme is patriarchy, and it's a boy/man who's dealt with loss and abandonment. And so he focuses on the American dream as he gets older because he sees himself as making a real identity. He doesn't realize his dad left when he was young. He doesn't realize how much coddling has happened until it's pulled from under him. So at the end, he's making, he's grown, but that's not really, I don't know how to make that climatic at the end. It's more of like a recognition. Does that make more sense?
Yeah,
okay.
I mean, in my personal opinion, and this is just one person's opinion, I don't know that it necessarily needs to be a big to do. I think there are plenty of novels. I can't think of one specifically, but I know I've read novels where the story is, I guess I would call it more quiet, and it is really more reflective.
Yeah.
And I don't personally see anything wrong with that.
Okay.
What do you feel you would want to change? Like, or why do you think it needs to be something different?
It's so internal. And I'm a poet, and so sometimes I have an issue with it being really pretty and people not knowing what I'm talking about. So you're following this character through an emotional journey that they don't really know about until the plot changes. But I don't know how to drive an external plot with that, is what I'm trying to say. Like it's all, at the end when you're reflective and introspective, it's not necessarily like you just have this complete idea about who you are and what's going on in the world. You just have a very clear difference of recognition of who you are.
And it's funny, because when I hear you describing your project, I feel like it feels so familiar, because I feel like I have read quite a few books that are like that. I just can't think of a specific one right now. And so personally, those types of novels do speak to me. And I think it is a matter of finding your readership and not everything is going to please everyone.
Okay, that makes sense to me. I'm over here trying to be a whole different kind of writer. And I thank you for the comments in the chat too. I feel less isolated. That's it.
I wanted to add some stuff to that. All right, so a lot of times in like the really like introspective books, what's happening with the character is that they're giving up something to get something else that'll have more of a personal impact to them. And so you can really drive this with setting. And so basically one of the things you can be doing is having it almost as if the setting is like trying to show the character, hey, this is what you can gain. This is what's going to be better for you. And so you can represent the character's change by having them give up what they had at the start of the novel and having them gain something else that allows them to understand themselves and understand the world better. And so like climax doesn't have to be like an external action-based thing. You know, climax can be just like an emotional filling within the character, because really as humans, that's what drives us. Emotions are what allow us to take action out in the world. Without emotions, we wouldn't be able to do anything. So that's it.
Thank y'all.
Oh, Emily, you have a question?
Yes, hi, and I'm in the car, so hi. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so I've been wrestling with one of my characters who I basically he comes, sorry, okay. It's a romantic dramedy limited series, and there's multiple couples and romantic relationships happening in a town. And then one character comes to the town, and there he falls in love. But his backstory is very weighty, and it touches on prejudice against undocumented immigrants and things like that. So anyways, once he comes to the US, when he's a minor, he gets adopted, and then drama happens with the family that he's adopted into, and that breaks apart their family. So the characters want, at least initially, is that he, and I think throughout the whole thing, is like he wants to repay his adopted mom and grandma for their kindness and things like that. And they don't need money or anything, but because the family broke apart, which I won't get into, but it broke apart through his adoption. So he feels like bad for that and stuff. He wants to try to repair the relationship with the prejudiced grandfather, his adopted prejudiced grandfather. So anyways, drama and stuff, but I'm having trouble with that. It's kind of like a want that's unachievable in a way. Like how do you measure him being able to achieve that? And also like the grandfather's so prejudiced, it's not going to, just him going to talk with the grandpa, that's not going to work, and it takes time. But throughout the story, he's not like every day trying to do that. And like, so I have him come to the town and to help out with this one thing that's related to the grandfather, but indirectly. So basically I'm wondering, like, how do you balance that if like their want is something that they're not going to be actively pursuing the whole time? Like he comes to the town to just kind of start to do that, but it's like not the main thing that he's doing. He's just going to be doing a job basically to help out indirectly, and there he'll fall in love. And the whole show is mostly about the romantic stories and the other couples too and all that. But when it's this character's want and need, I'm like kind of struggling with how to balance it. And then if it's helpful to share, later on, his romantic interest, he finds out, is somebody that his prejudiced grandfather would not want him to be with because he's prejudiced, and the grandfather likes or cares for the woman that he'll fall for. Not romantically cares for, but as like a fatherly kind of love of sorts. So yeah, so I have conflict later down the road that will question Carlos's want to try to, like prioritize the prejudiced grandfather, and he'll be like, no, I like it. He'll be like going for like love for his adopted mom versus love for his romantic interest. So I feel like that end is good, but the middle and beginning I'm kind of struggling with, if that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, so one of the things you can do to develop a lot of content and a lot of conflict in this situation is have your character interact with the culture a whole lot, since I know as a racial minority, that's a huge like struggle in life, trying to balance between like the culture that you're like born with versus the culture that's out there in the world, and trying to learn both at the same time and reconcile those two. And it sounds like in your particular novel, this kind of struggle is going to be a really big part of it, because that's basically what happens in real life. And so you can really get a whole bunch of content that way. And so even when your character is or you say that like your character, you're wanting him to interact with like the prejudiced person, and whatnot, like just interacting with the broader culture will basically help your character grow more. And so you can really write a whole lot about that.
Thank you. And sorry, so when he came to the US, he was a minor. So he did kind of all that growing up. And then now he's like 25 and now wants to repay his adopted mom and stuff, and repay her and like, bring the family back together and stuff. So that's why he kind of goes on this venture. And so, yeah, I guess he's going to be like delivering packages for this business and stuff like that. And so he'll be able to do things, but it's not, I don't know if that makes sense. So he's not as like, he's kind of like, he's going to be able to speak English and like know the culture and like, and he's like, I want to also what paint him as like really like a cool character and not like, oh, I'm struggling a lot, which maybe is making him like not such a main character or maybe not interesting. But like he does struggle later when he realizes he's falling for somebody that he shouldn't fall for if he wants to bridge things with the grandfather figure. So it's kind of crazy.
I have a question.
Sure, Emily, before we do that, did we answer your question, Emily?
I don't know. Thank you, though. I think just talking through it's helpful. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Go ahead.
I just want to know what the other elements of story that we're covering.
Yeah, if we're ready to move on, let's see. Yes. I think we're on to, world building. World building. I think Tamsin and Alex can probably speak to that more. I tend to write real world with a slight twist because I like to write what I know. So Alex or Tamsin, if you want to say something about world building.
It's one of my favorite things. For me, a lot of my story revolves around that world building. There's nothing I love more than to paint a picture and create everything involved in that world. One of the dangers of world building is info dumping. And one of the things that sorry, I've got a lot of motorcycles going by, and if it's loud, I'm sorry. It is one of the things that I think that a lot of newer writers, because I know this because I was the same way, have a tendency with world building is to info dump a bunch about the world building in that first chapter, which during Nano, totally fine. You'll probably take that chapter and yank it and put it to the side and pull pieces from it moving forward when you do your more final version of it. But a good world build, a really solid world build, is going to aid in your storytelling. You don't have to draw maps. You don't have to have anything like that if it's not what speaks to you. You don't have to use a real place. You can make up a place. I know someone that actually took the map of their hometown and they traced it and then they renamed all the stuff and they made it done, but that way in their head, they could still see where things were and they just knew they'd renamed it. Like they still kept them as businesses and they kept the same layout, but they changed it so they could use it. But it was a very, very real world of this little town for them because they just changed names so people didn't know that it was such and such town in this place. But world building is a favorite thing of mine. And I think that you can get caught up in it. You have to be careful. It's like research. And so I'm more interested on questions people have about world building and also what Alex has to say about what he likes about world building.
All right. So one of the things about world building, so pretty much every novel or most novels, there's going to be some amount of world building, even if it's based off of the real world. You're still trying to figure out that setting. It could even be just like a room. So with world building, most genres have pretty small worlds, like relatively, but the three big genres that are going to have really expansive world building are going to be historical, fantasy, and sci-fi. But the thing about these three genres is the world building isn't the same. The world building accomplishes different goals depending on the genre. So with historical fiction, the genre or the world building is going to focus a lot on capturing those historical elements to try to rebuild history so the reader can experience that. And then with fantasy, the point of world building is fantasy is to give the reader a place where they can escape to and just like escape the real world and experience another land completely. And then the point of world building in sci-fi is to show what's possible. So a lot of times you'll focus on like technologies or governments or cultures because you're just showing the reader, okay, these are some things that could theoretically happen, and you're wanting the reader to kind of think about and contemplate the setting more. So like in sci-fi, it's a very intellectual approach to world building, but then in fantasy, there's like a lot of emotion in the world building because you're trying to give the reader an experience to allow them to escape the realities of everyday life.
There's a question from Allison. Let's see, about using historical figures and places in a fantasy. For example, I will use real places and real historical personages, is that how you say it? To spin a fantasy tale. Is that dangerous?
It depends. So that's exactly what I'm doing. I mean, I went in and Billy the Kid and all the regulators are in this story. And I've used real history and I've used all the real places. And I don't think it's dangerous. I think that it is something that really will help build your writing, especially if you get to, you get to visit that place. If not, Google World is fantastic. But it is, I think that the only thing that it could be, the only way it can be quote unquote dangerous is if you're dealing with content, how do I put this, that is fragile. So for instance, Billy the Kid fans they're pretty emphatic about a lot of things. And so one of the choices I made early on was to get the history as exact as possible because of that. And I always, and I always tell people, look, there's fantasy in this, because that's the other worry is I don't want them to think that they're buying a historical story, just historical fiction, and all of a sudden there's werewolves. And they're like, oh God, what am I doing here? So I make sure people know that. The other danger is if you're writing about something super sensitive like I'm writing about a murder mystery and the people and the relatives of the people that might have been accused are still alive. And so you have to be careful there as well. So I guess the question is when you say, dangerous, it depends on what level of danger you're talking about. If you're talking about, is it going to make it dangerous for you to write it? I don't think so. I think it's actually me personally, obviously, I think it's a lot of fun. I love using real places and real people and giving them language and letting them speak again and all that. But it does mean research, and it does, and depending on how closely you want to get that historical accuracy. If you just want to kind of choose characters from history and kind of create your own thing over here, That's okay too. That's the beauty of fiction. Do what you want, do what you love.
Okay. Any more questions on world building, or can we move on to organizing, scheduling, how to stay writing during November?
We can always come back to world building if anybody has any other questions, but I think that
questions in the chat, so let's move on. Where should we start? What's your number one tip to get your words in November, Tamsin?
Try to sit down each day, even if you only get 500 words in, because eventually there's going to be a day that you get 3,000 words in, right? So don't focus on the exact, I have to get this exact number. Sit down and write each day, even if you just have an hour. Try and just sit down and get some words done. There are going to be days you get more done and days you get less done. So don't beat yourself up if you're on day 5 and you're like, 2 days in a row I have not been able to write, or 2 days in a row I've only gotten 500 done. That's okay. Just keep going. There is nothing wrong with that.
All right, so one thing or two things I want to mention is that whenever you're writing for Nano, don't be so concerned about writing your story in order. It's okay to jump around. If you're thinking about a certain scene and you're not quite at that scene yet, just jump to that scene and start writing it, because the point is to just get words down. So jumping around will be very helpful for you during November. And then the other thing I want to mention is that sometimes the tool that you're using to write will facilitate your writing process. So there was some talk in the chat earlier about Scrivener. For me, I like using Scrivener for getting ideas down really quickly, because there's certain features such as there's like a cork board with note cards. And so you can like make note cards about a scene. You'll just write down like what the scene is about on the different note cards, and you can rearrange them. And then you can like go into the note card and it basically turns into like a Word document almost. Well, it's not really a Word document, but it's just a text document where you can actually write out the scene. And so that approach actually helps the jumping around part. So if you're like, ooh, I want to write a scene where this happens, you can just like make a note card, and then you can go to the cork board and visualize just the different scenes that you write and rearrange them. And that can give you more ideas and give you a better idea of how the story is supposed to play out.
I use Word because every time I've ever tried to open up Scrivener, I look at it and go, I am now totally confused and I have no interest in writing, and y'all can kiss it. And I move on. So if you are not someone who uses Scrivener, it's okay. I create something very similar in that. I have a folder, and in that folder, I've got different ones that say, chapters, and I have a thing that says cut scenes or character information. I have a document that says, Fantasy Bible, History Bible, and stuff like that. So I use it very similarly, but I use Word and I use Excel to do my stuff. And I use calendars because it's historical. So I go and I find out what day. I go Google and I go, hey, in 1885, January 1st was what day? And they're like, Thursday. I'm like, fantastic. And then I go through Outlook. I'm like, which freaking year starts with a Thursday? And then I print those and I change the year at the top, make photocopies, and then I write out all the history on it. Some people would actually build that in Scrivener. I'm old school, so I handwrite that onto a calendar. There's no wrong way. But he was like, Scrivener, and I was like, you don't have to. Someday, Alex, I'm going to have you show me all the beauties of Scrivener, okay? And you're going to show me how
the right person for that. Sonia's the expert. But yeah, you don't have to use, like, there's no one tool to rule them all. It's not Lord of the Tools, right? So just whatever works best for you, that's what you want to use. If Word is your go-to, if LibreOffice is your go-to, if Scrivener is, if Obsidian, and don't be afraid to use multiple tools. I actually use both Scrivener and Word. I just like Scrivener for like getting the rough ideas down and organizing, but like my final writing, I do it in Word. I just take all the stuff that I did in Scrivener, and after I'm done organizing, I dump it into Word and finish off my writing and editing in Word because I just like the way that it flows, and I like the tools that are available in it.
I think that's one of the reasons why I work in Word, is I like the editing. Anyway, that is not answering all the questions that we were trying to go towards.
Actually, there's been some questions about how to sign up and all that, so I will do a quick screen share. If I can.
You're right, Stephanie. We are not old. We are seasoned. I love you. Thank you.
All right. So hopefully you can all see my screen now.
Ooh, sexy.
And this is where you'll go, is NaNoWriMo.org. You'll get the screen, and then right up here in the right top corner, you hit sign up. You sign up. It's completely free. NaNoWriMo is a nonprofit, and it's a just for kicks thing. Let me sign in, and I will.
Long password.
All right. So when you create a profile, you can, the first thing you're going to do is create your project for November. Announce a new project. I'm sorry?
I said I so need to still do this.
Oh, yeah, me too.
I haven't made decisions, Kim. I haven't made decisions.
So let's see, I'll just call it Nano 2021. What is your project status? How much? I'm a private person. And then this little check mark right here, associate with a NaNoWriMo event. That's the one you want to click if you want to do all the tracking and get the badges for this year's event. So make sure that you have this. Otherwise, people will say, oh, I can't track my project. I don't know why I'm not getting the badges. It's because you forgot to click this little check mark right here. Make sure you're associated with NaNoWriMo 2021. On to your goal. And oops. You can do all that later. There we go. So now on my profile, I have my new project. I've written 0 out of 50,000 words. We start on November 2021.
Okay, for those that may have forgotten to do that, is there a way that you can go in and correct that, or do you have to start over?
For the, I don't know. I think you might have to just announce a new project and just hit that little, is that what you're talking about, Sharon?
Yeah.
I think you might just try to, I'm not so well versed.
Well, you might try going under, sorry, I just had to do something kind of similar. You might try going under your profile if you've already done it, under the settings. Okay. There, just to see if it.
Yeah, it looks like you have to start over.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Does that answer the question to people who are asking about where to sign up? Oh, also, here's the big thing about Nano. If you go under this community tab, you're going to find your home region, the second one from the top. And it'll ask you, well, of course, since my, but And you can connect with people who are in your region, because I know we have a couple of people here that are not from Albuquerque. And so your local MLs will also have, like, this is the home page for the Albuquerque region, and that's where we'll announce all of the Albuquerque events. And you can go and visit other regions too. But if you sign up for your home region, then at least you'll be in touch with you know, all the local events, and all of the events this year are online. So I suppose on some level, it doesn't really matter what region you associate yourself with, but if you ever want to meet people close to you, it's a good way to build community and make some friends, and just make sure you're into the home region. And then you'll find right here where it says, go to your regional forum. And this, people got confused last year when they switched over, because the forum and the web page are on two different pages. So there's a whole forum, NaNoWriMo forums, that is not part of NaNoWriMo.org. It's forums.NaNoWriMo.org. And there again, you can connect with your region, and then you'll have all of the local chat of your region. There are so many categories where you can connect with other people, official stuff, Camp Nano, sponsor offers. A lot of companies offer their software at a discounted rate specifically for NaNoWriMo. And sometimes some sponsors will offer a winner bonus at the end of NaNoWriMo. If you end up getting your 50,000 words goal, you can get a discount on certain software, as long as you make sure that you've been updating your project in your stats. And there will be a little pop-up thing once November starts, where it'll say update my daily word count, and you can put in the number of where you are, how many words. So, and then once you have your 50,000 words, some of these sponsor offer will offer discounts. But you can connect with so many people in so many different categories: story development, you know, finding people who are in your age group, or finding people who are writing the same genre. Really, the forum's a great place to connect with a bunch of other writers. Just remember that it's separate from the NaNoWriMo website, and you do have to go to up here forum, or from your home region to go to your regional forum. Does anyone have any...
How do you connect with an individual? Like, with some people posted names, so how do you use that?
Right here, buddies. Going all the way in the bottom. And then you can invite a buddy. Hold on. I don't visit this much during the year.
The search users is at the top.
Right.
You can write in their name.
And then invite to be a buddy. Thank you, Sharon.
You're welcome.
Is there a way to find, like, if you don't know people, can you find people on there who might be doing something similar, or whose profile?
You're probably better off on the forum and connecting with people in, you know, in the genre that you're writing, or and then exchange usernames from there. Our region, Albuquerque region, also has a Discord, and if you're on Discord, it might be worthwhile to search for your region there too. There's lots of ways to connect virtually. You just have to know where to find it.
When is the Discord going to be active?
For Albuquerque?
Yeah.
Well, I suppose from now on, I set it up, and then Alex is helping me out with Discord. Yeah, I have been busy.
Hey, yeah, we'll try to post some more. And then for those of you who aren't in Albuquerque, feel free to join the Albuquerque Discord
absolutely.
server. Like we actually have quite a few people who aren't from Albuquerque and are in the Discord server. So feel free to just join.
And it's really just, you know, if you find that you like a certain region, just join them. You know, Nano is a very welcoming community. So you'll, you know, if you find that there's a bunch of people in the region that you like and you kind of like their style, then just jump in.
Is the Discord? Sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh, is the Discord server link up in the New Mexico region forum yet? I can't remember.
Let me see.
It's on the New Mexico region homepage. I don't think it's in the forum. It's on the actual like Nano homepage. There's a link to like the Facebook group, and then the Discord, and then the forums. And so you can click on that Discord link and that'll take you to it.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's on the regional NaNoWriMo page.
I was going to say that I'm part of the Albuquerque region and Washington County region in Oregon, because we lived for 8 years up in Oregon. And I'm not sure if we're going to go back to Oregon for my husband's training with work or not during or anytime soon. So I'm just hanging out with both.
Let's see. There's a question from Carol. What is Discord? Discord is an online chat program. Is that how you would describe it, Alex?
Yeah, it's kind of like, I've heard a lot of people say that it's like if Slack and Reddit had a baby, is what people have said. And I'm like, you know what, that's actually like a really good descriptor of it. So it's like
you know what those other ones, I don't know what's, I have to say I'm old. I don't know what Slack is.
It's something that like a lot of businesses use. It's kind of like Microsoft Teams is basically kind of
okay.
it before Teams.
Messaging.
Instant messaging.
And
yeah, Discord, it's just another like online type of community, but the nice thing about it is that it's a little less free for all and Wild West than Reddit, even though it's kind of the same gist.
And we'll set up, well, I'm volunteering you, Alex. Alex and I will set up a Discord tutorial, I guess, if you want to call it that, just to kind of familiarize yourself. It can look a little intimidating when you first get onto Discord and you're like, oh, what's all this? It's all text. I don't know what to do. I just have to figure out, we'll just have to figure out a schedule for when we can put that on, probably on a weekend, right? And the nice thing about Discord is that you can interact with some of the other regions in word wars. And so we'll have an event that runs, you know, and like, okay, everybody type as much as you can. Let's see how much Albuquerque region got. Let's see how much, let's see who are we connected? Las Cruces. Let's see how much Las Cruces got. And then it's really just for kicks, but it's a fun way to connect to the other regions. So we'll make sure to set that up. Let's see. Going back to the initial question that I posed to Tamsin about how do you know, what's your number one tip? I don't know that I have a number one tip. Definitely writing every day. Write every day, even if it's just a few words. Just try to make it a daily habit and commit to your writing. You know, you have a story to tell and you think it's important. So prioritize it and give yourself permission to, you know, take that time for yourself and say, I'm going to spend time on writing my story. One of the things that helps me is leaving off with a little note to myself of what I'm going to write next. So when I get to the end of my day, I put a little note saying, okay, I want to write this scene or this scene next, and this and this and this has to happen, so that when I pick up the next day, I don't have to spend 30 minutes rereading yesterday's scene and I'm like, oh yeah, what was I doing at the end? I just have a little note that says pick up right here. So I found that super helpful. So the goal is 1,600 words. It breaks down to 1,667 if you do pretty much if you split up the 50,000 words into 30 days. And when we run word sprints, where you basically write as many words as you can in a very short amount of time, 10 to 15 minutes is what we tend to set them at. As you get more used to not censoring yourself while you write, you'll find that you can really crank out a bunch of words. And for me, Nano has always been about quantity over quality. And if you can let go of that idea that, well, it has to be good or it has to be even decent. Like, no. You just got to get those words out. Also, because I found that when I don't censor myself, things come out that I hadn't even thought about. Things happen in the story and it's like, whoa, that happened. Okay, I can go with that. So just letting your fingers fly and your imagination flow and don't worry about, is this any good? That comes later.
First draft is never good. There's your answer. Don't ask yourself if it's good. It's not. Keep going.
Yeah. Don't even try to be good.
You don't have to. I mean, if you really want to really get into a scene and you're going to write some great stuff and you're going to write some shit stuff, and they're both important. So don't fret about it. Just go.
Yeah, and Natasha, the goal of Nano is just to get 50,000 words by the end of November. And so it doesn't have to be like you hit a certain amount of words each day. So if you do like 3,000 words one day and then 1,000 words the next day, as long as you hit the 50,000 at the end, then you've reached your goal. And it's okay if you don't hit the 50,000 words at the end, because this event, it's for you, the writer. Nobody is going to be judging you if you didn't hit the 50,000.
And I guess another tip for reaching your 50,000 words is attend the write-ins. If you're a social creature, it can really help. We plan to put quite a few on a schedule, hopefully on a fairly regular schedule, so that you can put it in your planner or your calendar and say, okay, yeah, Friday evenings are for writing. So you have that time set aside, and there's other people attempting to do the same exact crazy thing that you're trying to do, which is where I get my energy from, is knowing that I'm not alone. I'm not the only one who thinks writing 1,667 words a day is a good idea. It's like, no, people are doing this. I'm not crazy. So yeah, connect with your local forum, with your local MLs, and see what kind of events they're putting on, either on Zoom or Discord, or just on the forum, sometimes interacting with people, exchanging ideas. Connecting is a really great motivator for me to write and to know that I'm not alone.
That's why I'm so mad we're not writing in person. It's one of the best ways for me to get my writing done is I go meet up with everybody and sit down, put the headphones on and just focus, which sounds weird, right? Like, I'm going to go hang out with a bunch of people and put my headphones on. But I think it's one of the best ways to, I think that writing requires a mixture of both. So I think if you can join the online stuff this year, it'll help you out. You also won't feel like you're just in a box alone writing.
Yes, and then you can hear other people's keyboards clacking really loudly, and you're like, they're writing so fast, I gotta write faster.
I have some questions about the website, etc. I heard people talking about Word versus Scrivener. I don't know how to pronounce that, but are you writing in one of those and then transporting your words into Nano, or does it?
You don't do anything in Nano. All you do on the NaNoWriMo.org website is update your word count. So your writing is on your, on your end, your own file, your own computer. You don't have to submit anything to Nano because it's really, like I said, it's just for kicks. It's just to say that you've done it, you participated. If you reach your 50,000 words, you get to call yourself a winner. Just to say that you did it and you can do it.
Okay, then the question was, do they have like tools on there, like maybe an outline or just different things to help you plot generation, stuff like that?
Yes, but where was that? Yeah, let me share my screen again. Okay. So right here under Writers Resources, if you go to the Nano Prep tab, because right now during October, they're basically saying it's Nano Prep time. So they have all sorts of, they call it a course, but it's really just a couple of templates that you can download and look at and help you come up with a story. And these are all in Word format, I think. I've downloaded them.
Okay, thank you.
Someone wrote in, what happens at the end of November? We all have a drink, maybe not with each other in person, and we celebrate the fact that we did the thing, right? I know that the site used to have you copy paste in your 50,000 words to validate. Does it still do that, Kim, or no?
It didn't do last year because they
didn't. No,
they couldn't get the website updated fast enough. They had all sorts of problems with the new website, and so they got rid of the validator. I'm not sure what's going to happen with it this year, if they're just going to leave it off. It's just honor-based system.
Yeah, it's the honor. I mean, obviously, yeah, you could have typed up the lyrics to Mary Had a Little Lamb and copy pasted it enough times and thrown it in there, and the thing still would have said, hey, you've hit 50K. So it's always kind of been the honor system. But afterwards, when we're in person, we usually do an event where we celebrate the fact that we finished, and we'll probably do something online in that regard if we can. And hopefully next year we'll do things more in person.
And we, in the Albuquerque region, we host a kickoff event as well on October 31st. And it's not officially on the calendar yet, but it'll probably go from 11 p.m. to 1 a.m., something like that, where we start writing. We'll have a little
Sunday,
chat.
Right?
Yeah.
I'll be in bed. I love you all, but I have a day job.
And so, we'll have a little chat from 11 to midnight. And then at midnight, we'll say, go, and we'll start writing, and you could get a few hundred words in before your official writing session on November 1st.
Extra points if you show up to this in costume. I'm kidding, I'm being silly. But no, really. Costumes.
What other questions do you guys have?
I have a suggestion, and it's just about, I definitely agree, kind of writing with people has been a huge help for me. And one of the things that I do is I do a very important meeting. Are you guys familiar with that? So a very important meeting is more or less a group of professional writers. They lead the meeting with a bit of meditation, and then you have 45 minutes to an hour to all just kind of sit and write at the same time, completely virtual. And they have multiple times every day of the week. and you can get in there and add it on. So I use that quite a lot. And I'll put the website in, and it's completely free. Of course, they ask for donations or what have you, much like the Nano site. But it's just a mindful writing community that's pretty cool, and just wanted to let you guys know about that. But it's very helpful, and you know, same kind of thing. Some people are muted and they're just writing, but you can literally just see everyone, look up, and everyone's just really diving in there. So just wanted to share that bit.
I have a writing group with a bunch of my writer friends out east, and we meet every other Tuesday, and we write in the evenings. And some of us will be doing Nano, so it is on.
Let's see, I'll put a link in here too. This is a virtual, if you've heard of FocusMate, this is where you schedule an hour time slot or a half-hour time slot to work with a virtual coworker. And you basically just say what you're going to be working on, and then you both work quietly, and that's it. But it's a great accountability tool. I don't think you can pick who you pair up with. It just depends on who shows up in that time slot, but it's one-on-one. So if you find that helpful, I've used it a few times for random work, just, you know, things that I didn't want to do. Like, okay, I gotta book a meeting with someone else, and we'll just both work on the really nasty task.
I wanted to mention a couple of resources on writing and just getting better. So yeah, people in the chat I saw they were mentioning the Save the Cat writes a novel. And so this is a really great book. It has outlines you can use. I don't know if anyone can see. And it
can you read?
You what? Yeah,
can you read this?
Yeah, you probably can't read it. But one of the cool things on it is with the outline that it talks about, it actually goes through and shows several well-known novels and how they fit that outline. So that's really helpful. And then another really great resource is this story by Robert McKee, but it's a tome, as you can see. So if you could read that before November, then that is you have godlike abilities. So this was probably more an after November project, because it's quite a beefy book to read, and there's a lot of really great information in it.
I want to say there's a book called Magical Words that I know a bunch of published authors put together about helping with writing. I'm trying to find it where it is on my thing, and I have a feeling it's tucked away in my writing room. I'm in my living room at the moment. It's a much better view behind me than if I was in my room, trust me. So I was trying to find it. It's called Magical Words.
Any other questions or comments? Please feel free to unmute yourself and speak up.
I have a question, and I'm not sure whether it kind of fits in, but it's something I need help on anyway, so you might have ideas. So last year was my first NaNoWriMo, and I had a story idea in my head. And so my whole NaNoWriMo, because I didn't have time to plot anything or even know what the heck I was doing, so I just started writing scenes. So now this past year, I've been working on understanding the plotting more and the different plot points and things like that. Perhaps because I'm doing it backwards, or some people, if you're a pantser, it might always work like this, which is just off the seat of your pants rather than doing any plotting. Do you have an idea of how to fit some of the scenes, or create or rework or get some of the scenes to fit certain plot points? Anybody?
Yeah, so being able to put your scenes in a visual order and rearranging them really helps. So if you can see all your scenes visually, it can help you get a better idea of the structure. And so you could use physical note cards for that. You could use...
Tamsin is happy that you did not say Scrivener.
So yeah, just having a good way to visualize it can help you figure out the order. And then one thing I would like to say about outlining and structure, like for me, one of the things that really helps is I'll do some outlining, but I don't like completely outline the story right at the very beginning. And so I'll do some outlining, then do some writing, and then outline some more. Because whenever you're doing outlining versus writing, these are two very different processes in your brain. Outlining is more of an analytical process where you're making a whole bunch of choices and determining structure, but writing is more of an emotional process, and there's a lot of feeling in it. And so one of the great things about this method is it has planning in it, but there's also a lot of feeling in it, so it makes the story more authentic, and it allows it to feel more natural to the reader instead of something that was like planned out and like a gimmick.
So also, I think part of the deal is as a newer writer is that I have this big list of scenes and I have kind of a structure or flow or whatever you want to call it, that talk about how the story should progress. Is it completely subjective to you what scenes you just feel go into certain plot points, or are there things to kind of look for, or especially even in your writing, or tightening up of a scene that you should really be going for?
Yeah, what you're going for a lot of times with writing novels is you're going for that change that we mentioned earlier. So organizing scenes based off of how they help the story progress is kind of what you're going for. And so a lot of times, like, you'll start out a story either on like a really positive note and then it ends on a negative note, or you'll start it on like a negative note and it ends in a positive note at the very end. But what you want is you want your beginning and your ending to be separate, distinct things. You don't want your character to end up in exactly the same place as they were at the very beginning, because then it feels like nothing happened. And so organizing your scenes in a way that shows how things progress is kind of what you're going for. And so like a lot of those books that have like outlining tips, they'll say what order the different scenes should come in. But it's writing, there's no like hard and fast rules. There's no writer police unless you count like editors and publishers, but really writing is for you.
There was a question from Sharon that I missed earlier, just scrolling through, about balancing life and full-time job, writing hours, writing more on weekends, or just push evenly every day. I guess I'll answer first. I tend to get all my writing done at the end of the day, and my family knows that I walk out of family duty at 8 p.m. and it's writing time in November. And in prior years, I might do some of this year too. I've done some like meal prep stuff ahead of time where I, put some stuff in the freezer. I'm like, you guys are on your own. I'm writing, and and they just know it's November, like mommy's out. And I will actually try to schedule some write-ins during the lunch hour, because I know for some people that works really well, just to kind of get a few words in during lunch. So, but how about you, Tamsin?
My family all knows that they won't talk to me much in November. As far as making time, I have to actually put it on a calendar for myself because I work for the emergency department for a hospital. So I am slammed all the time and I get done with work. And what I do is I have to then just continue sitting at the same desk. It's painful. So sometimes I set up another writing area out in my living room by my fireplace. That helps. But yeah, I have to put things on a calendar, and I'll actually put reminders on my phone. It says, "Have you written today?" That helps me.
How about you, Alex?
Yeah, everyone's different, so you just have to find what works for you. For me, I tend to do more of my writing on the weekends because during the weekdays, my day job is very like intellectually intensive and I'm on the computer all day. So whenever I get home, I'm just like dead. Like I can just stare at the computer screen at a blank page and get very little work done. And so I will put some words on the page during the weekdays, but that's not where the bulk of my writing happens.
Yeah, same.
On the weekends.
I try on Monday through Friday, but
same.
That's interesting because for me it's the other way around. Like weekdays are great and weekends are like family time. Like I need to do my writing, leave me alone.
Right? I have a dog and he's okay with my writing agenda.
Let's see. Yale asks, have any of you found apps that convert your voice to typed words? Did you know that I just recently learned this? That Word has a speech to text option. Hold on, I'll show it to you.
Dragon, of course, is the best choice. The Dragon program. It comes. I mean, that's as a tech kid, I can tell you that's going to be your best. We use them in the hospital. All the doctors use them to put their notes into the system. And so you teach it your voice. They got me one when I broke my hand at work years ago. And so I highly recommend the Dragon if you can afford it. But I don't know anything about Word. That's interesting. I hadn't heard that yet.
Here, I'll
one more reason to love Word, Alex. No, I'm being a pain in the ass.
I actually do love Word. Word is actually my favorite. But
iPhone notes. iPhone notes. I wrote an entire book in iPhone notes.
Oh God, that sounds painful.
Okay, right up here in the upper right corner. Do you see it?
I like
Dictate.
I like Noveler for my writing.
Noveler? What is that?
It's a like a cloud application on it's
not like a puzzle.
let's see. Let me see if I can pull it up. I actually got it with Nano.
Oh, sometime in the next 40 minutes. Probably soon.
Do they not have it anymore? Oh, there it is.
Words on Words, Introducing Noveler, Daily Bulldog. Noveler is not. Noveler.
Wonder if they got rid of it. Because I got the Wayback Machine. It's Noveler.org. Let's see if I can do a screen share. I don't know if I can do a screen share or not. It's noveler.org. I'll put it in the chat. And I got them. I was using them for Nano 1 year, and they lost a big chunk of my words. And so they gave me like lifetime to make up for it. Gave me like a lifetime membership for free.
Another reason you always save everything in multiple locations.
Yep.
I keep it on 2 different sections in my computer, both on the computer and in the cloud drive that we have at work. And then I email it to myself every time I make a big amount of difference to it.
Yeah, after that incident, I started doing that.
And they'll have National Backup Day, during Nano, but back up your writing. Yeah, because every year there's at least one person who's like, I lost everything. I think we covered it all, unless anyone else wants to put a question or comment in the chat or speak up.
I'm going to make some comments on software again right quick. So if you're looking for Dragon for dictation, it goes by the name Dragon Naturally Speaking. So that's how you might have to search for it to find it. I don't know how expensive it is. I don't think it's super expensive, but yeah, that's pretty much the top software. And then another software for writing that's really good is called Final Draft. It's the industry standard for like screenwriters in Hollywood. And so it's built for that, but you can also use it to write a novel.
And Karen asks, how do you keep track of drafts? What is the naming process you use so you don't fall into final version, etc.?
I keep working on the same document. Some people write a chapter and then save it as a chapter. And that way you're not going draft 1, draft 2, draft 3, draft 4. Is that what you're saying?
I also found a neat software within the last year, I think. It's called Papyrus Author.
Oh, yeah.
And you can keep track of your characters in there and your places and your items or things that come up in your story, and it tracks how many times a character name is mentioned throughout the whole thing.
I know Scrivener has a it's not a versioning, it's what do they call it, like a snapshot or something function. So before you make any big changes, you can like, I forget what it's called, but yeah, it's a way to version your drafts without actually having to rename the whole document. You just take a snapshot of your document at that point in time, and then it saves it, and then you can keep working within the same document.
Yeah, it allows you to like color code it too. But I think it's only available for the Mac version, right? Or did they introduce it to the Windows version?
I thought it was in the Windows version too.
Is it? Okay, yeah, they might have introduced it. But initially it was the Mac only one.
Michelle, you have a question or comment?
I do. There's so many beautiful resources that you all have mentioned. And are you going to be putting them in a follow-up email? I don't necessarily want to watch the recording again, but I would like to have just the resources for reference.
You gotta pay.
We could probably do that, but I think the recording is gonna go to Sonia, so she's gonna be the one.
I wonder if everybody put what they were, there's things like, oh, read this book, read that, and then there's like, it's just a little overwhelming. So I'm wondering if maybe it's all in the chat. I can just save the chat, but I was just like, at one point I just stopped taking notes, to be honest with you. It was just like, everybody's got so many great ideas. As somebody who's brand new, I've never done this before. I've been making a living as a writer since I was 20. I'm now 52. So this is the first time I'm actually writing for myself in this type of setting. So I'm excited about it, but at the same time, I'm just like, holy shit, this is like another PR campaign that I'm doing. You know what I mean? So I just wanted to be fun. And I was just like, God, if you guys could help me out a little bit with, especially like those books and like the main things. Like, I don't know if I need everything. I tried doing the text to writing. And by the time I did that one time in the car with something. And when I got back to my desk to actually unpack what I had actually said, I was like, this is a hot mess. So I don't know if this, I don't know if this is like really worth it. Like I could either unpack what I just did 30 minutes in the car, or just write something new for 15 minutes. So, but anyway, that's my response. And if you guys feel like you've covered everything, then I'm going to get on with my day, but I don't want to miss anything. That's it.
Yeah, it should be possible to do that. Like I said, I think the recording is going to go to Sonia, and I don't want to volunteer her for a job while she's not here. If I can somehow get a hold of the recording, I can put that together. But we'll have to see how that works behind the scenes.
And I mean, I guess the resources thing is a pretty good start, right? There's like I saw here, like they're trying to sell us projects and whatnot. So I guess NaNoWriMo itself has a lot of suggestions on sponsors, right?
Yeah, they
So when I'm one of those people who's like actually like out of area, so I bet like once I start getting with the Asheville, North Carolina group too, they're probably it's gonna just be 1,001 recommendations.
Oh yeah.
And definitely if you're looking to invest in a software, I would say hold out until after, like when you win, because they generally offer like an even better deal if they do. That's the thing, it's not guaranteed, but if some of the vendors do the special winner offers, and they're generally better than what's currently on the website.
And so just to win, is that so everybody can win as long as you finish?
Mm-hmm. As long as you hit your 50,000 words.
So when you introduce yourselves as somebody who's won, it just means that you actually succeeded in the 50,000 words in a previous year. Got it. Okay. Yeah, it really sets off that competitive mindset. I'm like, oh, now I'm gonna have to beat Sonia or like whatever.
No. Like I said, it's just for kicks. It's just to be able to say you did it. That's okay. All.
It's just bragging.
Yeah, my husband just walked in and was like, "What the hell are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm setting up something new for November." He's like, "Okay." Now I'm like probably gonna have a conversation with like him, like, "Okay, I'm not available for the whole month of November."
I got a shirt on that says I won from 2015.
Sweet. Okay, great. Okay, I think I got it. Anything else?
Any closing words from Tamsin or Alex?
Have fun. Enjoy it. Don't be too hard on yourself. If you don't hit 50K, it's okay. Just have a good time and explore your craft and enjoy yourself.
Yeah, same stuff that Tamsin said. Remember, this event, it's for you. So just do what works for you and have a good time.
I would add one more thing, is that connect with your community. You get so much support from, connecting to your local region, online forums, in the Discords. There's so many people just cheering each other on to finish. So that's, it really is about the community with Nano. All right. Well, thank you all. Thank you for coming. I hope you guys got some good ideas, and I wish you the best of luck in November. And definitely look us up online and subscribe. Oh, not subscribe, not YouTube.
Send us friend requests through NaNoWriMo's page. Find us on, if you like us and we find us on Facebook. I know I'm there.
Yes, so. Facebook. We're on Facebook too.
Yep.
What's our Facebook name? Hold on. Let me tell you really quick what it is.
Awesome.
One thing I'm glad I got rid of was Facebook.
I use it under the name just so it helps me get my word out about when I release stuff, and I've got a page on there about Billy the Kid, so that's why I primarily use it. I don't have time for all the other ones.
Sorry, I'm looking because we have like a funny name. Oh, New Mexico NaNoWriMo Write-ins. Let me paste it in the chat here so you can know what to search for. And I think we set this up accidentally as New Mexico because we thought we were so important that Albuquerque was all of New Mexico.
That's all good.
But yeah, so, and there's a lot of chat on the Facebook page as well. So, sorry. All right. Awesome. Well, I guess that concludes the meeting. Thank you, everyone, and good luck in November.
Looking forward to seeing you guys as November. Thanks so much.
Bye.
Thanks,
Bye,
everyone.
Bye.
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 Thanks for your time.